I'm going to say something, and it's going to be hard to hear, but I need you to know that it isn't to hurt you. It isn't to invalidate your choices or your preferences, and many of you may already know this. Many of you may have known it long before I ever did, but not everybody does know it, and maybe the person who doesn't is you, and I need you to know that you need to hear it. And it's this. A manual transmission doesn't automatically make a car better, alright? In fact, it makes some cars noticeably worse. Now, it's long been this accepted truth that any bad car could be instantly improved with a manual transmission. But I'm convinced it's the greatest lie that's ever been told in the history of the auto industry. Okay, maybe not the industry, but just car culture in general. So what happens when you take a car that could have potentially been something more than it was and match it to a gearbox so bad that it makes falling down a flight of stairs seem like an all-expenses-paid vacation in comparison? Well, you get the 2017 Chevrolet Cruze, an experience that takes your already low expectations and introduces them to the Earth's core. So what is it about this car? Why is this worthy of all my ire? Is it even worthy of this amount of vitriol, you know? I'm the Roman. This is Race to the Bottom. And today, I continue my search for the worst car in the world by driving the hatchback from hell. Forget it. I don't even feel like doing an intro song for this. 2017 Chevy Cruze. I used to go to therapy. Then I turned 26. 2017 Chevy Cruze. The build sheet said 200 horsepower as long as I don't use the radio. I can't stand this thing, alright? And I'm still right now, as I'm narrating this at home, trying to ascertain just how much of that is my fault. You see, the Chevrolet Cruze, to use its government name, I'm not even calling it a Chevy right now, it paves the road to hell with its helpful intentions, and the end result is I just end up feeling bad about myself because, for crying out loud, man, I can drive stick. I've done it. I do it. I've owned a manual transmission car that I still miss today. Yet here I go stalling again like it's my first day in driver's ed because some genius decided, let's help people out by making shifting easier for people who don't already know how. But then, that's a cop-out, right? Because this is on me. At the end of the day, this is all on me. If I want to get the most out of this car, I have to meet it on its own terms, you know? I have to operate within the framework of this tall, fuel-sipper gearing. I have to accept that this is the throttle mapping that I get. This is the torque it's going to give me on these lower gears. This is the feedback I get. And if I can't make that work, then, well, that's just a skill issue, brother. But here's the thing. Even when I did push this car, even when I did meet this on its own terms, even when I did everything I was supposed to, and even when I took a ride as a passenger just to see what that was like, what happened? Well, I came to two realizations. The first, that nothing about this driving experience is worth all the trouble. And the second, and arguably more important realization, is that this is the rare stick shift car that would have been way better with an automatic, because it shifts like it would prefer not to. And all I could think was, maybe I could have a better experience of this engine with a more smooth shifting transmission, something that isn't simultaneously lazy and hesitant. Now, the engine here is the 1.4-liter turbo 4-cylinder, or the GM LE2, making a factory 153 horsepower at 5,600 RPM and 177 pound-feet of torque at 2,000 RPM on regular gas, although this has the trifecta Advantage ECU tune, which gets this up to 175 horsepower at 4,900 RPM and 208 pound-feet of torque at 3,300 RPM on premium gas. Our volunteer, Matt, is an insanely knowledgeable car guy, and he noted something that I think really rings true about this car. That no amount of red paint or sporty packages can hide its economy car roots. But I would add that if you want to aim for economy car versatility while providing the sort of draw that a nominally turbocharged engine can provide, then you're really going to need something better than a turbo that's as indecisive as a child of divorce trying to choose which parent he wants to live with. I don't typically drive all that fast, and yet it never does feel like the turbo really wants to be here. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have somewhere else to be? Am I inconveniencing you by trying to accelerate? How dare I? And when I wasn't busy stalling like a groom with whiskey wang on his wedding night, I was treated to a lower rev range that's about as thrilling as watching somebody else watch paint dry. What are these Fisher-Price gear ratios? Stop trying to do me favors. I haven't seen gears this tall since the fall of Solaris. Why are you higher than Dikembe Mutombo's nutsack? May he rest in peace, go Sixers. Alright, now, in this car's defense, fuel economy is good. The EPA reports 28 miles per gallon city, 37 highway, and 31 combined. And while Matt says he generally gets more like 27 city, 34 highway, and 30 combined, I'd still gladly take those numbers. And it does have some other positives worth noting. It has a 4-star safety rating and more airbags than a crash test dummy convention. And it even had some moments of spirited acceleration, to where the engine actually surprised me. But the moment passes once you're waiting for it to get kicked up to that next level. You know, it's like you get snapped back with this constipated feeling, like it could go faster, but it just doesn't want to. With that said, the suspension is actually alright. Once you're at cruising highway speeds, it's quite nice. It's actually kind of comfortable. And I imagine that if anything goes wrong with this, you're not going to be out on the street, hat in hand, begging for parts, since GM AC Delco parts are as cheap as they are numerous. Although I guess that depends on the model. But then, this isn't exactly going to take up real estate in the valet section of the King of Prussia Mall, you know what I mean? It's not even going to take up prime real estate at a Cars and Coffee. This is the hatchback from hell, because it's not only a disappointing driving experience, but it's as boring as it is aggravating. And it doesn't even have ironic appeal, instead offering middle management thrills with all the aesthetic of a junior high picture day backdrop, tied together with a design layout so baffling it could only have come from General Motors.
You have to like finagle this thing out of here and it comes out easy, but then trying to get it back in is an enormous pain in the ass. And there's a bunch of torque screws you take off that always want to fall down the engine. Or Phillips, they're Phillips in this case, but they still want to fall down the engine.
Just to change the air cleaner?
Yeah, and then you pull this off and there's this weird cylindrical air cleaner that's held in with a retainer that's like trying to get these off when you don't know how they're supposed to come off. Like you go, well, do I push on this and pull and you feel like you're going to break it?
Yeah.
Every year when I change it, it's like that. And because it's a year goes by, it's just enough time to forget. And I was telling, mentioning to him that if you want to do the cabin air filter once a year, on the Cobalt and the Sonic, older GM products, you would drop the glove box door and there were these little tabs you'd squeeze in the door, rotate down more, and then you could just reach back there and pull the filter out of a little cubby hole. On this one, you have to remove the entire glove box assembly. So you pull this panel off, you pull this panel off, you pull the center console cubby panel off, you have to remove the bottom kick panel screws, and then you expose enough plastic to get the 5 Torx heads out of the glove box assembly, so the entire glove box comes out, and then you can get to the filter.
Oh yeah, let's drop the entire glove box assembly and take out the plastic trim to get to the cabin air filter. Let's not affix the front door lock plungers at all, so they can rattle around like teeth in a Tooth Fairy's tin can. Let's force drivers to double up on downshift to get the power they need to do anything. Are you down for more down? And even with accessible, cheap parts, you're still dealing with labor that's likely above the ability of your average person to do themselves. For example, Matt previously had to deal with a sticking clutch pedal, as the clutch actuator cylinder pipe elbow has this opening where tiny bits of debris can get stuck, forcing the clutch open, and so you have to get an equivalent part from the stick shift of the diesel version of the Cruze. But the transmission needs to be dropped to get to the part that needs replacing, which is $1,000 or more for the labor alone. So that's fun. But then Matt also ended up receiving a technical service bulletin to deal with a GM identification problem, as the turbocharger threw an underboost code, which the dealership found was due to a wastegate failure, which required the replacement of the entire turbo and all the associated components like hoses, clamps, and fittings. And oh, wouldn't you know it, the emissions vapor vent system canister also failed, because GM design means the vent tube was letting water in, so that was another expensive fix. The fuel tank pressure sensor also went haywire, but as Matt tells it, the dealership took pity on him because by this point he was already in the middle of having the turbo and emissions canister done, and while the part itself was cheap, it was in a difficult spot to reach, so they just did the sensor for him at no extra charge since he was already paying around $2,750 for the turbo, the canister, and all the associated parts and labor, plus the inspection which was coming due. Never mind that this is all happening at around 87,000 miles, so it's not even like this car had reached an unappealing odometer reading for Bring a Trailer. I suppose the blessing is that each of these separate things went bad at exactly the same time, so it could all be taken care of at once. But you get to a point where you have to wonder when the sunk cost has sunk too low, right? Okay, say you're living with a roommate who never washes his sheets, and he just carries that rancid odor with him everywhere he goes. And now it's set up shop in your nostrils, clinging to your nose hairs like Tarzan swinging from a loosened vine, making a home in the gnarled forest of your olfactory abode. You think, well, I'm saving a lot of money living with this slob, and I've already done it for 3 years. Okay, cool. But do you have 3 more years of this? Whiling away your 20s living with a guy who doesn't wipe, who's up until 4:69 a.m. playing Call of Duty and smoking that Millard Fillmore, banging his girlfriend in communal spaces and then busting after 4 business minutes? Is that what's hot out here in these streets? Is that what we're gonna tell people we did for 6 whole years? Just made a commitment to going gray early? The Chevy Cruze is that roommate. But the fact that this was GM's last stick-shift hatchback before they went whole hog on trucks and SUVs, well, more so than they had already, was part of the reason Matt even gave this a shot. And I think it'd be natural to assume that since it's GM's last manual hatchback, they're clearly going to show out for this, right? But nope. This could be the only car on the road as you're playing GTA, 5-star wanted level, dodging rainfall from military choppers, and you're still going to take your chances in the ocean rather than get behind the wheel of this 5-door salute to calling it an early night. I'm surprised GM doesn't have more iron in their blood work from all the beef they have with everyone, because this was a competitor meant to go head-to-head with the Ford Focus, the Mazda 3, the Honda Civic. It was like GM was doing its damnedest to outdo everyone in the market segment while turning in homework they finished on the bus ride over. And then they just sort of rage quit when this didn't work out the way they wanted it to, because they didn't just phone this bad boy in, they called collect. And look, maybe they were giving their full ass, I don't know, and it's because I honestly can't tell. It doesn't feel like there's much even here, beyond a fairly comfortable ride. Now, maybe they had designs on making something better, but it didn't really work out, unfortunately, as it would not see a 3rd generation. This car wasn't what anyone thought it would be when they put it out to market. And that realization is not too far off from a near universal human experience. Eventually, everyone has to reckon with the notion that they aren't who they thought they'd be. Maybe GM didn't set out for this to be their last manual hatchback, but then things didn't really pan out the way they wanted. Sometimes those dreams that we have, they just don't happen. But that doesn't mean we can't still live the life of our dreams. It's just that the dream changes. You go from wanting to make it to the NBA to being healthy enough to one day make it to the AARP. You go from wanting to win an Oscar to wanting to win Employee of the Month. You go from wanting to own a Lamborghini to wanting to own a home. In the fall, you sweep leaves off the deck of your apartment, or what I like to call millennial lawn mowing, and you take stock of the dreams you had, the dreams you lost, and the dreams you gained. But there's an important distinction to make in all of this, and I hope that you don't need to hear it. But if you do, I hope you really listen. Just because your dreams got smaller doesn't mean you have to settle for less. Sometimes we downsize our goals to make them attainable, to make them fit within the scope of the life we're living. But that doesn't mean we were ever foolish for wanting more for ourselves. Maybe you'll never get that Lambo you wanted, but that doesn't mean you have to just take this lying down. Maybe the Cruze could have been better than an experience that innovates in the craft of disappointment, that struggles to give you the acceleration you're looking for, and gives you a gearbox as sluggish as a stoned snail. You don't have to take this. Nobody does. So I'll tell you the same thing someone should have told Nicole Kidman at some point in the 90s. You are way too good for that Cruze. Naturally, this is going in the bottom 5, but where? Well, I can't believe I'm saying this, but we're actually saying goodbye to the original Race to the Bottom leader, the 2008 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo. You've done it, Mike. You've done it, and I couldn't be prouder. I really thought that this would be on the list forever, but it's free. It's graduated, you know? But where will the Cruze go? Well, it's going to be near the bottom, but I don't think it's worse than the Sentra. But is it worse than the Journey? Honestly, no. I'm sorry, bro. I just really didn't like the Journey. It's not your fault, man. You know I love you. So the 2017 Chevy Cruze takes the spot from my most controversial review still, the Volvo V70. So that means the GMC Sierra 1500 is now on deck to graduate from the list, followed by the Volvo V70. The 2017 Chevy Cruze is at number 3, followed by my brother's Dodge Journey at number 4. And celebrating 1 year at the bottom of the list, the 2015 Nissan Sentra. Can anyone knock this thing off? Because right now, I'm just not seeing it happen. And yet, even as it was bad enough to spend a year here, I still feel like I can go even lower. That I haven't truly found the winner of the Race to the Bottom, you know? But anyway, I'd like to thank Matt for volunteering and for his patience, and just generally being a good guy and a great sport, and enriching me with all of his car knowledge too, because you never stop learning. And if you have a car you think can win the Race to the Bottom, that it can win, nothing redeeming about it, send me an email at regularcarstheroman@gmail.com. We can only accept people willing to travel to us in southeastern Pennsylvania, but I don't know, drop me a line. And if you liked this video, consider subscribing, liking, commenting, or even sharing the video. And if you'd really like to support RCR in a bigger way, consider joining our Patreon. The link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your week. Cheers.